magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Where you gonna be tonight? Oh, oh, oh. There's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Get ready for the rest of your life. Hello and welcome to SassafrasCast. My name is Rorie Kelly, and I am a tarot reader, singer-songwriter, and all-around personal growth nerd from Long Island, New York. In just a moment, we are going to begin with the witchy weather report, but first, a shout-out to my patrons. I have a brand new patron today, at least one, so I am opening up my Patreon to make sure that I get everybody into this shout-out. Welcome. If you're tuned in, this is a patron benefit. Patrons get to hear the live broadcast and see it live as it's happening and get into the comments. So if you're tuned in, feel free to leave a comment. Let me know if you can see and hear me okay. And if you have commentary as this episode goes by, like put it in there. Sometimes someone says something, especially Brittany. Brittany's famous for this. Sometimes someone says something real insightful and it ends up getting into the broadcast because I'm like, yes, this show is now better. It is now better because of you. So let me open up my patrons. I get confused every time I have to do this. I want to make sure this is so confusing. Okay. All right, shout out to Amanda Curry, Rachel Miller, Grayson, Periwinkle Twilight, Rebecca Jones, Brittany Campbell, Joey Neal, Jennifer McPhail, Ondine PM, Songwriter Vox Guitar for PM Edition, Deanne Miller, and Spirit Through Steel. Thank you so much for being in my world. Thank you for being patrons. Thank you for being in my life. I appreciate you deeply and dramatically. Looking great. We love to hear it. Hopefully you can hear me too. You'd probably tell me if you couldn't hear me. Okay, so I'm a little disorganized at the beginning of this podcast. I'm going to be real. I'm a little disorganized at the beginning of every podcast. That's just how I live my life. I've learned that I have to give myself a schedule and deadlines so that the things get done promptly, and I am less and less attached to the outcome of doing them quote unquote right. I'm more interested, like good is better than done. No, other way. Done is better than good. In other words, to quote an internet parable that I have read, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. Meaning, don't let perfection be the enemy of getting it done, right? Like, it's better to kind of half-ass your way through brushing your teeth than not to brush your teeth, right? Like, maybe you don't spend the full 3 minutes, but if you're brushing your teeth at all, better, more of a win than not brushing your teeth, for example, right? And that, my friends, is the topic of this podcast, and we're focusing on our spirituality and our self-care, because this is a spiritual self-care podcast. And the title of this podcast is Do It Wrong, Baby, because I want to make your practice accessible to you. I want to make it accessible to you and your very specific needs. Accessibility is a little bit of a buzzword, and honestly, it's a buzzword that should be a buzzword, and it shouldn't have to be a buzzword. Sometimes when these things become buzzwords, what happens is their message gets diluted. Accessibility, diversity, all of these values that are really important and about inclusivity. And what can happen is people can misinterpret them or dilute them or water them down and be like, there, now we're doing accessibility. We put a ramp. Now we're doing diversity. We hired one white woman and one black man. Like now we're doing the things. And of course, in truth, these things should be talked about, not debated as to their validity, but like accessibility and inclusion should be something that we think about all the time, every day, and in new and different creative ways and in new and evolving ways. And as we understand that different people have different sets of needs and also have been differently served and not served by our current system and culture, it should trigger the compassionate part of ourselves to ask ourselves, how can we do better in this one particular instance, knowing that there will be another particular instance tomorrow. It's not one and done. It's an ongoing, lifelong practice. But here I am asking you to turn this practice on its head and make it about you, which is usually not what we do in accessibility advocacy, is like, make it about you. But I mean, make it about you, make it accessible to you. Hey, Brittany, welcome. I was just giving you a shout out about how you often say really insightful things in the middle of a broadcast, and I end up getting them into the show, and the show is better because of you. And I think I made a couple of posts recently with quotes from the Witchy Self-Care Challenge, and there was one day that I posted the quotes from like a day 2 or day 3 or something, and I think 5 out of 6 were from you. So thank you for just being over here with all of the friggin' insight forever. Anyway, I'm going to talk about making our spiritual and self-care practices more accessible, and specifically by doing less to do more, and with this idea of what can I not do about it, taking away the barriers from having a spiritual practice. I'm tired when I get home. I don't know what the hell the moon is doing, and I don't remember what the moon is doing, and I don't remember what I'm supposed to do when the moon is doing this, and then I go down a Google rabbit hole, and I don't remember how to put out moon water, and also I don't know what I should put it in, and if there are certain things I should and shouldn't be doing, I don't know, I'm stressed out, right? All of these things that make it harder for us to do our practice, for us to do what spirituality is supposed to do for us, which is bring us a sense of connection with ourselves and with anything we believe in, letting us connect with, like, here's why I'm alive in a bigger way than just kind of going through the motions. And so throughout this podcast, I'm going to encourage you to do it wrong and do it half-assed. Yes, big progress over perfection vibes. Yes, that's the vibe. But first, Witchy Weather Report. I am reading for you today with the Crystal Visions Tarot. At this moment in time, if you're listening close to when I record this, it's right around the new year. I'm recording this for my patrons on Saturday, December 28th. So it's very possible that by the time it gets released to you and you hear it, it might already be 2025. It's right around the new year. We have the turn of the year. I'm recording this in this nebulous time between Christmas and New Year's, that for many people is a very chilled out, relaxed time, and for me is usually pretty busy. And right as I say this, we're about to have a new moon which kind of coincides like just a couple days before the new year, which is kind of special. Couple things are in retrograde, couple things are doing different things, but I don't want to focus too much on the astrology and possibility of the moment. What I want to talk to you about is this card I'm about to pull, which is meant to meet you wherever you're at, whether you listen in real time, right here if you're tuned in, hello, or whether you are listening right when it comes out, or whether you have gone down the rabbit hole of my podcast 5 to 10 years later and discovered me, in which case, hello, new friend, I'm so grateful you're here. This card is meant to meet you wherever you are at in space-time. The best of my heart to you, across space and time. I'm reading from Crystal Visions Tarot by Jennifer Galasso. My friends, we have the 8 of Swords. You think you're stuck, but you're not stuck. That's the biggest thing. I saw a great comment, but I'm going to stay focused. The 8 of Swords. You think you're stuck, but you're not stuck. That's the biggest takeaway I want you to have. And this is beautiful because it ties in so deliciously with the message of today's podcast, but it's not on purpose. The 8 of Swords. If you are not watching this, if you're listening, first of all, I'll let you know there is a video version. It's on YouTube. And you can search youtube.com/@Sassafras Tarot. It's the 8 of Swords. And I'll describe the card to you. We see a figure, in a long dress with long hair, surrounded by a bunch of black birds who seem to be almost like making a maypole out of them. They are like tying ribbons around this figure, and they're inside a circle of swords. And on the horizon, we actually see the sunlight breaking through, but there's a lot of dark clouds right around it. There is nobody here except for these birds making a maypole out of this person, like kind of wrapping them, tying them in ribbon. And if she so desired, or they so desired, I'm trying not to put too much gender on tarot cards because the gender is not the important part of a tarot card. If they so desired, they could probably escape quite easily from this situation. They've got a blindfold, they've got this ribbon, it's not tied very tightly, it's literally just birds playing, which is really interesting. Is that I think about birds often representing other people's ideas, other people's perspectives, and the way that plays into this tarot card is that literally it's like you're allowing yourself to be wrapped up in other people's perspective, but they don't actually have the power to trap you. Only you can trap you. And so I invite you, if you're listening right now, to consider that what is making you feel tied up is not something you have to allow to tie you up, that you actually are free, that you actually can get the outcome you want, that you actually can be safe, that you actually are not stuck in the way you feel you're stuck. And that the answer comes from within. Whenever we're reading the tarot and we see a blindfold, it is an instant trigger to know I don't look outside, I look within for the answer. It's like if you take nothing else away about the study of tarot, if you see a blindfold, I'm not looking without, I'm looking within. Within. The answer is in me. The answer to getting unstuck is within you. That doesn't mean you necessarily even have to think your way out. It might just be a perspective shift that is required. You don't have to let other people's nonsense tie you up. There's no rule that says you have to. And even if there is a rule that says you have to, you can break the rule. Nothing will happen. You're not stuck even if you think you're stuck. What a beautiful way to start today's broadcast. So, oh, hello, Eight of Swords, my old friend. The Eight of Swords is actually, it's funny, I'm reading this at the end of 2024. The Eight of Swords is my personal guide card for 2024. So it's a full circle moment for me. Anyway, I wanted to share this great comment that came through from Lisa Diana while I was talking about doing it wrong. And like, do it wrong, do it half-assed, right? And she was like, oh, I can do the wrong part. And it was such a beautiful moment of joy and silliness. And that's the energy that our spiritual practice should have. It should have joy and silliness. Our spiritual practice, I am a firm believer, should have the elements of a really fun, silly slumber party. Joy and silliness to guide our path. It's very, very hard to go wrong. It's very hard to go wrong. Yes, Brittany says, also, Eight of Swords, they can literally kick one of the swords over, step between them, kick away the birds. Their feet and legs are not bound. Yes, the point is you're not truly as tied up as you think you are. You have the illusion. Perhaps things are making you feel like you're stuck. Perhaps because in the past, you've been in a situation like this and you really were stuck, right? Old trauma, old stories, but you're not stuck anymore. Thank you for this. Brittany also out here saying Eight of Swords, Two of Swords, High Priestess, and Justice, all blindfolds. Yeah, think about that. Think about how each of those cards, if you're a tarot reader like me, if you're interested in the tarot, think about how each of those cards could benefit from an internal rather than an external perspective. Okay, I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to read to you half from my template, which I kind of have every month, of just like my template of how I like to run the podcast, and half from an email that I wrote to myself earlier today, because I kind of had the idea of the podcast in my head, and I just wanted to get it down. I just wanted to get my thoughts down. So we're talking about doing it wrong. We're talking about making your spiritual and self-care practice accessible to you and your unique needs. So it's not about a global accessibility, but I will tell you that the topics I want to share with you in this podcast came out of my passion for making spiritual and self-care practices more accessible in a more global way to neurodivergent people, to people who have, different or less access than other people do to things like libraries and the internet and stuff like that, to people who have varying levels of privilege and varying living situations and things like that. I have a passion for making witchy self-care be a thing that anybody can access. And I teach witchy self-care classes. I've been doing this for about a year now. I've just come full circle. I'm teaching the witchy self-care intensive right now. And it's the first time, complicated sentence, it's the first time I'm offering a class for the second time. I taught the witchy self-care intensive in November and December of 2023, and now I'm back teaching it again. And it's the same course, but it's a whole new course. It's all of my courses are like that. They're designed to meet people where they're at. But anyway, I have been teaching witchy self-care courses and topics for over a year now. And I've become deeply passionate about making sure that the topics I share about are deeply, deeply accessible to each of my students. And I have a habit of asking them for feedback and asking them to say no to me and asking them to tell me about what doesn't work so that I can help them make it work. Because I am not the kind of teacher who's like, you have to do it my way. It's my way or it won't work. I'm the kind of teacher who's like, let's do it your way, because your way, i.e. the way that works for you and also that you get something out of, it's both, it meets the double criteria of this is accessible to me. I can do this without it feeling impossible or scary or like a slog. And I get something out of this. This pushes me enough beyond my comfort zone that I'm growing, but not so far out of my comfort zone that I just can't even get it done, right? That I just feel overwhelmed, right? That beautiful like edge finding path. And so I've become really passionate about taking away barriers from having a spiritual experience, taking away barriers to accessing your intuition, and taking away barriers to having a personal epiphany. And that is really the inspiration for this podcast, because it's something that I have done with deep love, and like it's felt like a privilege to get to do this for my students in the last year. And it feels like it has made me a better person and a better practitioner and a better teacher. And I want us to be able to do that for ourselves. Hydration checkpoint. If you're new to the podcast, we do these hydration checkpoints when I realize that I need some friggin' water. And if you're playing the Sassafras Tarot drinking game, you can do a hydration checkpoint with me. So I'm going to talk about some core spiritual practices and common barriers to them, as well as perhaps some uncommon barriers to them, and talk about different ways that I and my students collectively have worked through them in the last year, because I think this is a sticking point for a lot of people. I can't tell you how often I hear people tell me they can't meditate. And usually, and I say this, so don't stop the podcast. Don't be mad about what I'm about to say. Let me give you context. But usually they're wrong. And it's usually because they have an idea of what meditation is, and it conflicts for them with something they don't feel they can access. And as a result, they're like, I can't do this because I can't access XYZ. I can't clear my mind. I have ADHD. I can't meditate. But the truth is that meditation isn't about clearing your mind and sitting with a clear mind like a beautiful clear window pane. It is the practice of realizing I can't clear my mind, because I have to tell you, everyone, including neurotypical people, have difficulty clearing their minds. And I'm not saying there aren't more and different barriers for people who are neurodivergent in a variety of ways, but the whole point of meditation is that it's really hard to clear your mind, and we're practicing. And meditation is a practice that you're not supposed to ever be perfect at. It's an ongoing practice, just as accessibility and inclusivity should be ongoing practices. We will never get perfect about them because new use cases will keep arising, and so we will have to keep being compassionate and considerate. And similarly with meditation, new use cases will keep arising, and we have to keep being compassionate and considerate of ourselves. Yes. And Lisa Diana is saying not even needing to close your eyes, especially if you're hypervigilant. Yes. So I'm going to take us through some of the common barriers to meditation. One of them, I can't clear my mind. First of all, that's okay. You're doing it right already. It's okay. Having the awareness that I'm having difficulty clearing my mind is the first, it like shows that you're already aware enough to meditate, because meditation is at its heart a practice of self-awareness and allowing yourself to move through that awareness, to inhabit the awareness. There's no doing it wrong. It's just about where you choose to direct your attention. And if your attention feels scattered in a million different directions, then noticing my attention feels scattered in a million different directions is a part of your meditation practice that day. And neurodivergent people are actually uniquely suited to doing that. Neurodivergent people have, because of their experiences, already have a little bit more of a skill set than a neurotypical person would towards being able to have a meditative practice, because they've already had to cultivate some self-awareness around how their mind works and how it is different from the norm. And that self-awareness actually gives you a leg up on meditation. It is not actually a disadvantage. So that's a thing to know. And talk about closing your eyes, finding comfort with your eyes closed. So there's meditation classes, which I've never actually partaken in, but I had a roommate who did, in right around 14th Street. I don't know if they're still happening, but there's a New York City meditation center that offers these free drop-in mass meditation classes. Like, you will be crammed in like a lecture hall, you know what I mean? And they do open eye meditation because it's New York City by Union Square, and that would be an excellent time for someone to come through and just like steal a bunch of people's wallets at once while they were like blizzed out oming, right? They do open eye meditation on purpose to avoid that eventuality. And I remember my roommate telling me it was a different experience for her to meditate with her eyes open. And it took her a moment to get there, but it was just a reframe. And for some people, closing your eyes is not, for an extended period of time, doesn't feel comfortable because hypervigilance, right? And I can relate to that. Less about closing my eyes for me and more about closing my ears. A lot of people now, like loop earplugs and earplugs in general, are becoming a very popular solution for many people who feel overwhelmed by excess noise, who feel either that their attention or that their own stress is like triggered by environmental noise. And for me, the opposite is true. If I know I can't hear everything as clearly as I could, I get more stressed out, not less. And so people have recommended to me things like, oh, well, have you tried earplugs or whatever? And I'm like, I definitely will not be. Like at a concert to avoid damaging my ears, yes. But in day-to-day situations, putting an earplug in that is designed to reduce the ambient noise will make me feel more stressed, not less. And that's my personal thing, right? If for you, putting in the earplugs helps you focus, we love that. That's accessible for you, right? And it's accessible for me to not do that, to be able to hear. And so similarly, closing one's eyes to have a simpler sensory experience might make meditation easier to drop into for some of us, but for others, it will trigger our hypervigilance and make it very difficult to focus on anything else, right? So yeah. And I talk about meditation as an example a lot because I have led so many meditations in the last year in particular, but in general, since I've been doing this, since I've been running this podcast, having different experiences, running different challenges and workshops online and in person, I've run a lot of different meditations, and it's important to me to be able to have everyone have a good experience. And so now one of the first things I say at any meditation is you can allow your eyes to drop closed, or if you don't want to, you can gaze softly at a single point. You can do the thing that makes you feel. So I'm giving them an option that allows them to not close their eyes, but still not have a lot of distraction, right? I also know that movement and lack of movement can be barriers to meditation. And so there are practices. You can always find a meditative practice or a spiritual practice that will be something you can't do. There's always going to be something that is inaccessible. There are practices that require you to sit a certain way, like to have your back perfectly straight and be seated a certain way, or there's walking meditations. There's different practices that require different movements or non-movements from you that will not be accessible to everybody. And I'm pretty sure if you were actually like a monk training in that tradition and you actually had like a physical disability, that the other monks would get together and be like, yeah, do this instead. You know what I mean? But the second thing I always share with people is I want you to be comfortable during my meditations. I don't want your whole meditation to be about, I can't scratch my nose because I'm meditating. I can't scratch my nose because I'm meditating. My nose is so itchy. Or I'm uncomfortable because I'm sitting in half lotus and one of my feet just fell asleep, right? Or I can't really sit for extended periods of time because I get back pain. Meditation is a practice of awareness. But if all you're aware of every time you're meditating is pain, that's not a self-care practice. Or irritation, what have you. And so I invite people to do the thing that physically makes them comfortable. I invite them to be seated or standing or laying down or to take a walk around their room while they're meditating. And it's because some of these things I've experienced trying to meditate when I'm like physically in pain of some kind. I think of Savasana in particular, corpse pose in yoga at the end where you're supposed to like be like, you do your yoga practice, you're blissed out. And I've had lower back pain for a lot of my life, on and off, like not constantly. And I now at 40 have a good understanding of what causes it and what exercises and stretches I can do to help myself get back to a healthy place. But in my 20s, I was doing a lot of yoga and also doing my best to work on my back. And it did help to an extent, but lying flat on my back would always, always, always make my lower back hurt. And so corpse pose was like torture for me. Like, I'm over here supposed to be having this wonderful blissed out experience. Like, I just did yoga and now I'm lying flat on my back. Now I'm experiencing not doing the work, right? Just like the restful part. And instead what it does is make my back hurt so bad that I wish it was any part of the class, which is not the point of corpse pose, right? Until I had a teacher who was like, if your lower back hurts during corpse pose, then, just bend your knees so that the top half of you is lying down and your knees are bent. Bend your knees and let them angle in towards each other a little bit. And that will relieve your pain. And guess what it did? And it changed my life, right? And some yoga teachers are better at offering modifications than others. And I know if I were to become a yoga teacher, I'd be the person who's like, or do this, or do this, or do this, because that's who I am as a meditation teacher. Years into my yoga practice, someone gave me that option and I was like, corpse pose unlocked. And yet I still felt like I must be doing yoga wrong though if corpse pose hurts. Everyone else seems to be having such a nice time. And the truth is, no, I was trying to do something that my body was not enjoying. And the whole point of yoga is my mind and my body connecting and becoming friends, right? And so I'm at the end of this big mind-body self-care practice and I'm like, do the thing you hate. Why can't you enjoy it? What's wrong with you? So, yeah. So physically, I invite people to do the thing that works for them in a yoga practice, in a meditation practice, in a ritual practice, right? Do the thing that works for you first. And another big barrier to meditation that I hear frequently is I can't visualize. I don't have a mind's eye. And I know this is more and more common. I think it's called aphantasia. I think it's called that. But you can fact check me on that because I'm not 100% sure. But I know that this is a more and more common state. And I know that I've had people say this to me. I don't have a mind's eye. I don't see things in my imagination that way. I don't visualize. And the answer is in the question there. Because what everyone does have is an imagination. And different people's imaginations work in different ways. Because while I know that when I go through and give people a visualization and say, visualize this, see this, I get people who are like, I can't. And I don't want my whole experience to be inaccessible to them. That sucks. You know what I mean? Like, oh, cool, you're here for this meditation practice. I guess just sit this one out if you can't visualize. That sucks. Right? But what I do find is that everyone has an imagination. Every one of us can hear a story that a friend is telling and kind of imagine the story, right? Or can read a book or whatever and kind of imagine the story, right? When I told you about the whole open eye meditation on 14th Street and how it's a problem because a pickpocket could come in and steal your wallet while you're over there saying Om, right? You could imagine that. Maybe you weren't visualizing it. Maybe you weren't seeing in your mind's eye it happening, but your imagination was doing whatever it needed to do to facilitate you understanding my story, right? And so now I'm very careful to make a disclaimer. You don't have to visualize, but visualize if it feels good to you. I'm encouraging you to use your imagination. And I do the same thing with intuition practices and channeling practices. I just taught a whole intuition class, and we did a lot of automatic writing, and we also did a lot of kind of like more meditative listening. And for me, both practices have become very comfortable for me over the years. And for some people, they're like, I'm listening, I'm not getting anything. I'm listening, I'm not getting anything, right? It's a lot like meditation. It's like, they're like, I don't know. I'm not getting what I'm supposed to be getting. And that thought in itself becomes real hard to move away from. And so I invited people to not worry about doing it right, not worry about just seeing the thing in their mind's eye or just hearing the thing, but using a perspective of imagination to aid in their intuition, instead of listening and being like, what is the message from my guide? I'm listening. Are you there? Can you hear me now? What's the message? Right? Just listening and feeling like you're not getting anything. I said, what if you used your imagination? And what if you used the tool of automatic writing or drawing or typing, and just put your hand to the paper or to the keyboard and just said to myself, I'm going to let this come through me. I'm going to use my imagination and let my imagination imagine what is being said to me, right? A lot lower pressure. We all have this creativity, and intuition and creativity are deeply, deeply linked. And when I say they're deeply linked, that's unverified personal gnosis. I don't know what they look like in terms of brain scans. I'm really curious now that I've said that out loud. But I know that for me, the practice of accessing my intuition is very similar to the practice of songwriting, creating something out of nothing, accessing my intuition. And you can make the argument, well, maybe you're not accessing anything. Maybe you're just making it all up. And if y'all have been following me for any length of time, you know that my answer is like, maybe, and I don't care because it's helping. And that's how I feel about spirituality as a whole. So I invite you to allow your imagination to help you through different practices. And I invite you to consider easy mode as an option for any practice that you want to do. And I think that there can be a little bit of a fascination and mania for like, I gotta do it exactly right. I have to do the special arcane ritual, right? What would the grimoire say? What would the Book of Shadows say? What does Eye of Newt mean? And where can I get some? And how do I measure Eyes of Newt? And I think it has some herbal meaning that I don't remember what it is. Like it was shorthand for some other thing. Like to really do everything like quote unquote by the book, even though the history of folk magic is a spiritual practice that is not necessarily passed down in written form. Much of it is oral history, in part because, we're getting political. Here we go. I'm so excited because folk magic is the language of the oppressed, as are riots. And Martin Luther King Jr. was right about that, but I'm coming at it from another angle. Folk magic is something that traditionally in history, oppressed and marginalized peoples have turned to because more direct methods of getting what they want have not been accessible to them. Because if you are an oppressed group, if you are a marginalized person and you can't, engage in commerce because you're a woman and you're not allowed to have money or a credit card in your name, or because you are a person who themselves has been bought and sold, or you can't, overthrow the ruling class because the ruling class is working you so hard that all you can do is survive, etc., then it feels like there are no mundane resources available to you to get your needs met and to influence the outcomes of your own life. And we have watched folk magic practices develop out of marginalized groups of people. Santeria, voodoo and hoodoo. There's all of these practices that came to be during colonial times that basically were about slaves and marginalized people choosing to push together their own folk practices and spiritual practices, I should say, rather than folk practices. Cultural spiritual practices together, along with like the verses of the Bible, because slaves weren't allowed to read, but they were allowed to read the Bible. They weren't allowed to have a spiritual practice of their own, but they were allowed to be good Christians, right? And so we see these practices where there was like this analogous thing of aligning your spiritual beliefs with saints and figures and psalms in the Bible so that that spiritual practice would not get lost and could be safely practiced in a way that wouldn't get you like in physical trouble. Right? And now we have this beautiful, rich cultural history that I, as a person of white European descent, can't speak on with too much authority. I look at it more with respect. I can speak with authority on the practices of women over the years, developing an oral tradition of here's how we do different things, and herbalism and folk magic practices, as well as like at-home remedies that actually did use the scientific method in terms of trial and error. We learned that this works, so we keep doing it. We learned that this doesn't work, so we don't do it anymore. But because they were not written down and endorsed by Western medicine, which is something that women were locked out of, it hasn't been until quite recently that many of these different traditions have been studied in a scientific manner. And many of them still haven't been sufficiently, I would say, and sufficiently to make a realistic judgment call is what I'm saying. And so my point being, spirituality and folk magic in particular has this long, long history of we do what it takes to make it accessible for us right here in the moment. And I encourage you to make your practice about doing what it takes to make it accessible for you right here in the moment. It's not about following the magical perfect spell. It's not about following it by the book to the letter. Well, this is what it should be. This is what the association in my Llewellyn book told me. Oh wow, all of these books published by the few white men who could actually get something like this published, because absolutely a woman was not going to be able to get like a magical grimoire published. They were just going to pass it down to their daughters. Your own personal associations are more powerful in witchcraft than what the Llewellyn book tells you. And I'm not trashing on Llewellyn. I use a Llewellyn day planner every year. Big fan of Llewellyn as a publisher. But the magic that means something personal to you is actually going to be more meaningful and more effective than the magic that you do because you go out and buy a herb. You buy some kind of a plant because someone told you this is what you need for the spell, right? And there's something special about that too. There's something special about the magic of like, I need to get just the right thing and combine it in just the right way. And like the practice, the ritual, the arcane nature of I can't solve this myself. And so I'm allowing something greater than me to participate in it, right? That's kind of the energy we're participating in when we do that. But, if there are certain herbs that represent prosperity and you yourself never cook with or use those herbs and you have to go out and buy them and put them into a prosperity sachet, your belief might do a lot. But if you personally associate prosperity with like those pre-made single-serving popcorn bags because it was cheaper to buy a bag of popcorn and use an air popper, you know what I mean? But like the fancy flavored Pop Secret popcorn, like you associate that with being like, oh yeah, now we're eating like a real fancy snack, right? Then it might be cooler for you to do a prosperity spell with a Pop Secret popcorn, right? As the popcorn expands, so does my abundance, right? That might be more meaningful to you because it's something you already associate with wealth, for example. So we have the opportunity to make very personalized spells for ourselves. And we also have the opportunity, and here's where we often self-sabotage, to remove barriers. We get to claim our practice, and part of claiming our practice is making it accessible to us, right? Particularly with folk magic as traditionally being a part of, the craft of marginalized people, marginalized groups. We're talking about groups that wouldn't have access as we do to go buy some fancy exotic herb on Amazon and then go to Michael's or another craft store and buy a little thing to make a pouch and create a special little bag for it, right? We're talking about people who had access to what they had and were like, okay, here we go, right? And I think that the most powerful magic is, here's what I got, right? That's the Magician Tarot card. I've got this, I've got this, I've got this. How can I make it work? And so I'm going to bring us into the next segment of the podcast, which you got this, by asking you a question. What can I not do about it? This is my question. I love it. What can I not do about it? So I want to start this by saying, in my classes, and if you've taken a class with me, you may have heard me say this. I tell people, like, if something isn't working for you, tell me, because I want to make it work for you. I don't want you to just have to sit it out. And I encourage people to tell me no. So especially, I'm running this witchy self-care course. And one of the first things we're doing to don't lists this week, which I'm going to have us make a to don't list shortly on this podcast. I'm going to share that practice with you. We're doing to don't lists. And during the course of kind of introducing them to that idea of deciding what we will not do to free up our space energetically for self-care, I was like, I just want to tell you that if I tell you to do something and you don't want to do it, I love it when you tell me no. I love it. I'm obsessed. Like, it's become a catchphrase. I'm like, I love when women say no. I'm obsessed with it. I happen to be teaching a class full of only women. My classes are open to people of all genders, but it happens to be all women at this moment. I'm like, I love the sound of a woman saying no. It's so powerful. It's so great. And, we opened our class with a discussion of yoga and how for a lot of us, we wanted to make time for more yoga in our lives because it's been meaningful. And one of the participants was like, yoga has always felt like it highlighted an unhealthy part of her relationship with her body. It didn't feel joyful because of her own struggle with being in her body for different reasons. And, body shaming and fat phobia and all these different things about how your body is supposed to be. And for her, that type of a physical practice highlights rather than makes better that, right? And it's like different strokes for different folks. Some people have found greater body acceptance in yoga. Some people, opposite day, it creates more stress for them. And so she was like, I will not be doing any yoga during this class. And I was like, I love it. Tell me what you won't do. I love it. Set a boundary with me. It's delicious. I'm obsessed with it. And so I'm encouraging you to make a to-don't list and to make it a very personal to-don't list. One of my items on my personal spiritual to-don't list is I don't engage, I don't commit myself to like a heavy practice with a book or a class that constantly uses the word God. You may have heard me talk about this. And if the word God is meaningful for you, I will share with you. Just because it doesn't work for me doesn't mean it can't work for you. I'm thrilled for you. You know what I mean? But I will share my own experience, which is that I was not raised with religion. I was not raised hearing the word God frequently, but I was raised with a kind of vague concept of like the Abrahamic God, being like, I guess, Sky Daddy who likes you if you follow his rules. And I never found it to be a particularly relatable or loving concept. And there are other people who have other concepts of God that are very meaningful for them. And I'm very happy for them and encouraging them in that concept. But it meant that when I went into spaces where people are talking about God and they're like, God is love, God is this, like turn yourself over to the will of God. And I'd be like, I'm straight up not going to do that. That's not a concept I relate to. In much the same way, my other hard no is I will not engage deeply with a practice that requires me to perform gender. I'm a non-binary person. I do not relate to femininity. I am assigned female at birth, and I use the words female and woman to describe myself because I have had these unique experiences based on other people perceiving me as female, and I desire to own them. However, I am not interested, flat out, ever, in a spiritual in a spiritual practice that involves me leaning into my divine femininity. Now, you may feel differently. Divine femininity may feel freeing and delicious and wonderful to you and empowering. And if so, I love it. I love that journey for you. Please do it. You know what I mean? But for me, that wouldn't feel like a freeing, empowering experience. That would feel like an experience that tried to force me to do something I don't want to do, that doesn't relate to my self-concept. Same with the word God. It's not actually freeing when someone says, oh, well, just substitute whatever you want. Substitute the universe or whatever. Because having to read a book, for example, or participate in a class where every 5 seconds I'm having to be like, not God, the universe, not God, higher power, not God, something else. I'm having to constantly edit the class so that I can actually enjoy it. That's not self-care. That feels distracting and actively makes it harder for me to have a really special experience. And so when I run a class, it's important for me, like I share that experience with people, and I let people know if there's language I'm using that you can't relate to or you don't like for some reason, you tell me, because I don't want to be a source of that. And I run very small classes so I can be very personalized, and I use words that deliberately are not too associated with any one religion or any one tradition. And if someone tells me I don't like that word, I won't use it for them. You know what I mean? I ran a meditation the other day where we took an elevator down into our safe space. And at the end, someone said, please don't run elevator meditations. I love when a woman says no to me. She was like, please don't run elevator meditations, because I was trapped in an elevator once. And that it just brings up panic. And I was like, I will never do it again. Thank you for telling me. I'm not going to tell her, imagine something other than an elevator when I talk about elevators. I'm going to be like, yeah, I don't need to re-traumatize you when we're trying to have a meditation. I'm going to put a note not to put any elevators in there. Never again, elevator practice retired. I'm sure she's not the only one who's ever been trapped in an elevator or just has anxiety about it, right? So those are hard limits for me. I don't care about, my practice, A Course in Miracles. And I know a lot of people personally have had an amazing experience with A Course in Miracles. And I read A Course in Miracles, like I got the book and I read it, and it was all very patriarchal and all very like patriarchal godly. And in the beginning, they're like, oh, you can substitute anything you want for this. This is universal knowledge. And you know what? Every single practice was about submitting to the will of a pretty patriarchal God. And I'm really happy for people who can go through that and substitute their own beliefs or have a different concept of God and have a really meaningful experience. I know a lot of people who have, and I don't have to be one of them. It is not my job to play on hard mode, because I have spiritual experiences that are available to me in 2024 that do not include me having to be like, yes, I submit to the patriarchal God. And that's just me. That is my hard no for myself. It's not for anyone else, right? I'm not making a judgment on what's right or wrong or saying anyone should not follow A Course in Miracles. I'm saying why I don't. And I invite you to have hard limits like that around your practice. I'm not going to have a practice that pushes a gender role on me that does not match who I really am. I'm not going to have a practice that forces me to engage with a concept of God that is alien to me. And that's my personal thing. And your hard limit might be the exact opposite of mine. Your hard limit might be, God's the most important part of my life, and I won't have a spiritual practice that is not God-centered. And if so, love that journey for you. Like, do it. You know what I mean? But I encourage you to set hard limits for yourself. You have a right to limits and boundaries. And when we give ourselves limits and boundaries, we cast a magic circle of protection around ourselves. We say, this thing that I know will fuck with me is not allowed when I'm having this special experience. I'm not going to close my eyes because my hypervigilance will fuck with me and I'll have a hypervigilant experience instead of a spiritual experience. I'm not going to do the divine feminine ritual because it will make me feel like this is not my ritual and it's not for me. And I'll spend the whole time feeling like the odd one out instead of having a ritual that's meaningful. Excuse me, hydration checkpoint. I love hard limits. I encourage you to have hard limits in your practice. So we're about to do a to don't list. And I encourage you to make your to-don't list yours, not mine. If you hear my hard limits and you're like, that's just not important to me, I'm so here for that. Do yours, right? Not mine. So, which you got this. This is a portion of the podcast where I give you something you can actively do, which is funny because I'm actively having you not do things for this one. I give you something you can actively do easily to like add something to your practice right now. It's like bite-sized. It's something you can put into practice right away. And so I'm going to encourage you to make a to-don't list about your spiritual and self-care practices. But first, I want you to write a complaint list with me. Write a letter to the manager. Be the Karen you wish to see in the world. We're going to complain. Okay, get ready. We're going to have pen and paper, or you're going to type, or however, or you can like rant into your phone, whatever feels good. You notice even there, when I invite people to do a practice like this, like a journal style practice, I like to give options. You can say it out loud. I just had one of my students say, I was stressed about some of your journaling prompts because I am a bad typist and I wanted to type it up. And then I realized I could use Google Dictate. And I'm like, yes, queen. Yes, that's what we do. We choose a thing that makes it easier. You turn on the voice recognition so you don't have to type anymore, right? We love it. So do whatever journaly thing works for you. Speak into your phone or device, right? Type a thing, write a thing, whatever, right? But I want you to capture your complaints about your self-care and your spirituality. And I want you to make them as big and as long-winded and annoying as possible. I want you to be the person at the party that everyone is like, oh gosh, I gotta get away from this person. I want you to be so like pedantic and pissy in your complaints. Write down what's not working. Write down what sucks. It sucks to try to meditate. I'm going to give you examples, right? It sucks to try to meditate because whatever, I feel I have to close my eyes, and it sucks. Those things that we already kind of have like talked about and debunked, right? It sucks to try to have a moon practice because I really want to have a moon practice, but I don't know what the hell the moon is doing on most nights, and I don't remember to look. And then by the time I look, I don't know, and then I have to look up a practice, and then I forget, and then it's the full moon, but I don't know the difference between a new moon and a full moon practice. And then I have to go look that up, and it's too much executive function for me. Right. And it's too hard. I don't know how to do moon water. It stresses me out. Is something getting into the water? Do I have to leave it open? What if my cat knocks over the moon water? Right. I don't like to do yoga because it makes me feel bad about my body instead of good about my body. I want to do this thing. I want to maybe have something like a moon practice or have a manifestation practice. But I've always been taught that you have to like cast a circle, and I don't know how to do that. I want to connect to my intuition, but I don't know how to listen for the wisdom of my spirit guides, right? Write down every single complaint. Write down the things that are not working for you in your spiritual practice. And this could look like, I want to do this, but right? Because often with like a spiritual self-care practice, it's all at its heart optional. I don't think self-care should be considered optional, but unfortunately our patriarchal capitalist society does. Take a drink every time I say patriarchy or capitalism on this podcast, and please make it water or you'll be slobbering drunk by the end. Hydration checkpoint. All of these practices are practices we opt into, right? And if you're like, I want to do this, but that's your list. Make your complaint list. Make it long, right? Take all the time you want. Take more time. Take up so many pages. Make it obnoxious. And then, that's not your to-don't list, by the way. That's just complaints. That's just being the Karen we wish to see in the world, which sometimes we need to do. We need to let ourselves complain, because if we don't, we can't identify the problem. If we're always toxic bypassing, if we're always like, well, but I should be grateful, but I can do this and I have running water, I should be grateful. Well, if we don't let ourselves identify the problem, we can't solve the problem, and we're blocking ourselves from a really easy win most of the time. So let yourself complain, bitches. Then, this is my favorite part. We're going to look at the list and ask ourselves what not to do about it. I'm obsessed with this. I'm obsessed with what do I not do about this. I think I'm obsessed with it as a recovering eldest daughter, gifted kid, people pleaser, as a recovering pleasure to having class. right? Someone who had like the perfectionism is strong with this one. The everybody's parents liked me as to be friends with their kids because I was a quote unquote good example. You know what I mean? As a recovering pleasure to having class, I love asking myself, what can I not do about this? And I'm going to give you the first answer. The first answer is someone has probably already solved this problem. So you could do nothing to try to figure out what to do about it, and you could just Google it. Example, how do I meditate while keeping my eyes open? I promise you I promise you there's Googleable answers, right? Example, how do I do corpse pose if it makes my back hurt? Someone has already answered it, right? Google it. If you want to do the thing, but you have a blocker, right? How do I have a moon practice if I keep forgetting to look at what phase of the moon it is? So, congratulations. There's an app for that, by the way. There's so many. That's like my next thing is like, let something other than you do the work. What can I not do about it? Executive function problems. It's hard for me to track the moon phases. Get something that tracks it for you, and not only tracks it for you, but gets in your face. Get an app. There are many, many moon phase apps, and there are many active like moon tracking apps. Get an app that's like, new moon tonight, so that you're like, oh, it's time for me to do my ritual. And it like literally pings you and sends you a notification, right? I actually have a moon app on my phone. I think it's just called Moon. And it literally just has a picture of the moon, but it's an accurate picture. Like it depicts what phase the moon is. So all I have to do is open up my phone. It's right there on my screen, and I see, you know, how much dark and light there is in the moon, and I know what the moon is doing, right? You know, let someone else do it for you. Let an app do it for you, right? If you're having trouble with a practice that you'd like to commit to, then ask yourself, right? If you, for example, if you're like me and you're like, I can't do a friggin' Course in Miracles because if I hear one more word, like from this patriarchal God perspective, I'm going to like literally scream and start throwing things. Google what's like a Course in Miracles, but if you don't believe in God, right? Like literally you're allowed to do this. You're allowed to just like let someone else solve the problem for you. But some of them might be really, really specific, and it might be beneficial for you to figure it out, right? For me, my moon practice developed over time because one of the things, what I could not do about this is I could not do it perfect, right? And following the moon cycles was like a lot for me. And I happened to be in a group at the time that I was developing my own moon practice, where my cousin, Delia, had put together a group, which is still active to this day. And occasionally at the full moon, she'd be like, maybe we could all do a ritual together. It's online, so it was like not really together, but like we can all think of each other during each other's rituals. And even that was like too much for me. But I know it was the full moon because she'd post it, and I would just go out for a walk and I would talk to the moon, like completely unhinged. I'm just walking blithely through my neighborhood, like, hey moon, here's what's on my mind. And I found it to be really, really healing. And like months of doing that, before I was like, I wonder if I could do something special with the new moon, and looked it up and was like, oh, new moon is a time for new ideas, manifesting things, what I want to create. Oh, I could do that. I've been telling the full moon my complaints. I can tell the new moon the things I want, right? Just like it evolved slowly over time. So letting yourself have a slow burn is a way to be kind to yourself. And it can be a slow burn that never evolves, right? If I never did anything else but talk to the moon, I'm 100% that witch now. I can tell you what moon phase we're in usually and what you should be doing about it. And actually, stay tuned if you're interested in someone doing that, because in 2025, I am going to be launching a Monday Moon Meditation Magic Club. All of those M's, because I want to just call it because I'm a nerd. So stay tuned if you're interested in that, because I will be the person to tell you what the moon is doing and what to do about it and make it so easy for you. But if I hadn't become that witch, right? If my practice had only been, I go outside and I take a walk and I talk to the moon, that was so incredibly beneficial to me that it changed my life already, right? And if I never progressed beyond that, and if I just knew, okay, taking a walk and talking to the moon helps me, that would be such a big self-care win, right? We can let things be a slow burn, or we can just let something be good enough. Going outside and taking a walk and talking to the moon is always, always a good a good solution for me. It's always a good thing for me to do. So, I love this. I'm in the comments and I'm seeing a recovering perfectionist here. Big same. I seem to attract wounded healers, recovering people pleasers. They say that you become the person you needed when you were younger. And this is 100% true in my journey. And what I find, what has been the biggest blessing as someone who's like out pretty publicly sharing a lot, is that the people who come to me are the people who can benefit from that. And so I've accidentally made myself this wonderful community of wounded healers and recovering people pleasers and people who are deeply compassionate but have trouble putting themselves first, and people who want to have a really deep experience of life but also are grappling with their own neurodivergence or hypervigilance or what have you. And it's just such a blessing. Because as someone who felt like I was completely alone, completely weird and unlovable, I now have literally built a community. I literally have at my fingertips this beautiful, loving, interconnected web of people just like that. And it is like the best gift in the world. Anyway, try this at home. Write a list of complaints, make it lengthy and specific. Be the Karen you wish to see in the world. Write that letter to the manager. Write a strongly worded letter, and then make your to-don't list, right? And make it based on your complaints. Well, I want to follow the moon cycles, but this, and this get in the way. What will I not do about it? Well, I cannot follow the moon cycles. I can let an app do it for me. I can just let an app ping me when the moon is about to be full. There's probably like a routine on like your Amazon. I'm not going to say the word because I have one. Amazon, she who will not be named, or your, Google Home or whatever. They probably have a routine that will tell you without you even asking what the moon phase is. I know because I started a weather routine with mine, and now I can't get it to stop telling me the weather. Every day it tells me the weather, whether I like it or not. It's not the worst thing that ever happened to me. There's probably an app that will just do it for you. Right? That's what you could not do about it, is you could not do anything about it and just let an app handle it, right? What you could not do also is put pressure on yourself to like follow all the moon phases and do all the right things. And this is when we're releasing, and this is when we're building, and this is when we're doing nothing because the moon is void of course, whatever that means. My brain is void of course when I hear those words, right? You could not put pressure on yourself to go that deep and just be like, I'm going to go talk to the moon for a while and see if it helps. And maybe you'll go deeper. Maybe you'll be like me and become that witch and be like, yeah, now I do all the moon things because I let myself do it at my own pace, and it feels really good to me and it feels natural because I, piece by piece, I let it grow instead of trying to do it all at once. Or maybe you'll just never do anything but go outside sporadically and talk to the moon. And guess what? I promise you, if you do that, you will have epiphanies you wouldn't have otherwise have. You'll feel more spiritually connected. You'll feel more connected to yourself if that's the only thing you do, right? So like, give yourself permission. Anything worth doing is worth doing half-assed. Give yourself permission to half-ass it, right? Allow someone else to do it for you. Allow yourself to simply not do it at the level of perfection. Allow yourself to do it at the most half-assed level. That's a wonderful question to ask. What's the most half-assed way I could do this? Ask yourself, what is the minimal effort I could put out and still get the benefit? It's like something my friend Lara said to me once, which was walk into the room with the audacity of a mediocre white man. And we all know a mediocre white man who is committed to doing the least he can possibly do and getting the benefit still, right? And I say this with love in my heart. We all know someone like that, or we've all experienced someone like that, right? But there's something to be said for, well, what's the minimal effort? This is self-care. It's supposed to be easy. Self-care should not be a multiple choice test that stresses you out because you're not a good test taker. Self-care should play to what's easy and feels good. It should be a pleasure to do self-care. And yes, there are hard parts of self-care, like calling and making doctor's appointments and going and doing things you might be afraid of, like seeing the dentist, right? And making sure, like, and trying out different meds if you need, if you need medication to help you for any different reason. And, like working with different care professionals and navigating the healthcare system. There's parts of self-care that are hard. The parts that we do just for ourselves, we should give ourselves the gift of making them easy, making them feel wonderful, making them feel turnkey. Because we don't owe it to ourselves to be constantly playing on hard mode. Do it wrong, baby. That is the conclusion and the thesis of today's podcast. Do it wrong. Do it half-assed. Allow yourself to have a deeper spiritual connection by not putting pressure on yourself and by asking yourself, what can I not do about it? If you would like to talk to me about this topic or literally any topic, I would love for you to reach out to me. First of all, if you like this podcast, can I ask you a favor? The favor is really simple. Could you rate it and review it wherever you listen to podcasts, like a real review? And it can be the most half-assed review of your life, but there's like data to show that when people leave reviews, it's compelling and it might make them check out the podcast. And if I can get into one more ear, it would be meaningful to me. So like, leave a review. Tell me anything. Be like, yeah, I like the thing. Rorie curses too much, but good podcast otherwise. I don't care. Rate it and review it wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you could share it with someone, that's like double plus amazing. If you think someone would like this podcast, send them a link. Be like, I think you'd like this. I'd be so, so grateful. If you would like to support this podcast financially and unlock exclusive benefits, you can do so at patreon.com/Sassafras Tarot for $1 a month or more. Patrons get access to things like extra content, personalized tarot pulls, a witchy Discord community, backstage passes to the live broadcast, and more. If you have a question, idea, or suggestion, email me anytime at sassafrastarot@gmail.com or message me on social media. I am at Sassafras Tarot pretty much everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, Threads, TikTok, YouTube, and that is spelled SassafrasTarot. I recognize that I chose two hard to spell words as my brand name. This is what it's like to be me. If you'd like to order a reading, go on my social media or visit my Linktree. It's linktr.ee/Sassafras Tarot, and you will see links to where you can look at my readings on Etsy, or I have a landing page if you want to get my monthly tarot pulls. It's like, I'm still migrating away from Etsy, so everything's complicated. Feel free to message me if you want a reading and I'll help direct you. Thank you so much for being in my life. Stick around wherever you're at. If you've enjoyed this, please follow me because I'm going to be announcing new things in the future. I'm going to be, in the next few weeks at the beginning of the new year, first of all, pulling guide cards for people. So you'll get information on where you can order one if you want one, just one tarot card to rule them all, one guide card to give you advice throughout the year for anything that you face. Mine for this year was the Eight of Swords, as you know. And let me tell you, it has really, really seen me through the year. And I will also soon be launching Monday Moon Magic and Meditation Club. And that is, you know what? I'll just tell you about it because I already know how I'm going to offer it. It's not, you can't order it yet because I haven't done the homework yet. But it's going to be $11.11 a month, $11.11 a month. And every Monday at 11:11 a.m. Eastern Time, I am going to go live on both Facebook and an unlisted YouTube link so that you can access me either way, with a meditation for the week and also to let you know what the moon is doing and what you can do about it. That's the vibe. Monday Moon Magic and Meditation. And if you just want a DIY spiritual, it's not DIY, it's the opposite of DIY. If you want a done-for-you spiritual practice that helps you feel more connected to yourself, I want to give that to you, $11.11 a month, and you can be a part of the Monday Moon Magic and Meditation Collective with me, and also have access to that community, which I already know is going to be really, really special because I have some idea of the type of person who's going to join it. I have some specific ideas of who may or may not be interested in joining it, and I know it's going to be freaking incredible. That's going to be launched sometime in January. Anyway, This brings us to the conclusion of my public service announcements that I kind of try to cram in at the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Thank you for being in my world. Thank you for continuing to be in your world. Remember, if you're feeling stressed out, ask yourself, what can I not do about it? Farewell, my loves.